Welcome to the podcast about investing in startups, where existing investors can learn how to get the best deal possible, and those that have never before invested in startups can learn the keys to success from the venture experts. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome back to The Full Ratchet. On today's special segment of Investor Stories, the investors address trends, sectors, and markets that they think are positioned for outsized returns in the future. This is the segment called What's Next? On today's special segment, we have Ben Einstein of Bolt. Ben, as you look forward, can you talk about sectors or trends that you're bullish on and why it is that you're so excited?
Sure. Yeah, I think there are many trends that everybody's excited about that I'm actually less excited about. Things like drones and VR, AR, and other sort of really popular sort of hypey areas. I do think there's going to be lots of interesting stuff there, and consumers are going to see a lot of value. But it's actually something I'm less excited about than the average investor. I get really pumped about the least sexy types of companies, and so many times these are sort of enterprise or B2B products, putting some sort of new automation or good design or sort of streamlining the process into some world where you just don't think that technology can exist. And so these are things like oil and gas, or sort of complex aerospace stuff, or places where robotics can get really interesting. I think a lot of these issues are much more interesting to me as a sort of area to play in, because the sort of incremental change that you can affect in the world is so much higher than selling another gadget to the average consumer. And so I find that area of the world, which I know is huge and not very specific, far more interesting than the sort of general consumer electronic products that we see.
Very cool. On today's special segment, we have Stuart Larkins and Ezra Galston of Chicago Ventures. Guys, as you look forward, can you talk about sectors or trends that you're bullish on and why it is that you're excited about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone wants to be contrarian, but in my spare time, I love to trade. People around the office knows that I love trading Bitcoin and altcoins, and one of the things that you learn, and this is really Buffett or really anyone, is that in periods of chaos or in periods where market sentiment is at its ultimate bearishness, is often when the greatest kind of pockets of opportunity exist. And so just as one example, over the last 3 months, with the massive kind of fallout around the fintech sector with Lending Club and Avant and layoffs and nearly front page stories on the of the Wall Street Journal about some of the reporting or problems or investors no longer interested in buying the loans, I started thinking to myself, like, in a period of chaos, what are some of the opportunities that will exist? And so what I've spent much of kind of the last couple of months doing is trying to understand, maybe what went wrong, if anything. And it could be that nothing's wrong, it's just an overreaction. And then where pockets of opportunity may exist. So for us, and I'm spending a lot of time in fintech, and you should know that other people within the fund are spending a lot of time in compliance or in government, to kind of very unsexy areas where we think that there's a fair amount of regulation and chaos, and it's interesting. But as for me, as pertains fintech, my big thesis is that you're coming out of kind of a period of, call it 5-6 years, where a large percentage of consumers in America were basically able to live off venture subsidies, or meaning venture-backed companies who were doling out money on the cheap, or without a ton of kind of due diligence or whatever it might be, as well as were able to, in many ways, then kind of ignore the necessity of actually credit building or actually saving or any of the sustainable kind of things that consumers should do with their own financial health. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to unpack the entire kind of personal finance management revolution, understand what went right, what went wrong, and where we're very focused is in areas of kind of sustainable personal financial health building, in ways that are kind of not short-term stopgap solutions, but very long-term solutions. So that's one example of kind of a marketing chaos where as soon as we spotted the chaos, we kind of dug in a big way. And one of the things that we benefit from is, especially in Chicago, is an extraordinary network, not just in Chicago, in our fund as well, is an extraordinary network of executives and entrepreneurs in financial services and who have built fintech companies themselves, who can be, value additive in understanding the market, and understanding the opportunities and avoiding some of the bull traps or bear traps that might exist.
I feel like there should be some poker strategy or parallel here somewhere.
There's a ton of poker strategy. I mean, I was never the best poker player. What I was very good at was, this is not necessarily something I'm proud of, but spotting opportunities of kind of emotional anxiety or overwhelm, right? It is, poker is a very psychological game. Golf is a psychological game. I mean, you look at Tiger, who went from the best in the world to, with a psychological break. I actually don't follow golf as closely now. Stuart's the big golfer, but, you know better than anyone. Golf is the most psychological game, right?
Yeah, week to week. Look at Jordan Spieth. that one shot at Augusta that just kind of set his career back this year.
So poker is very similar, and that's really what you're kind of betting into and betting on.
On today's special segment, we have David Cowan of Bessemer Venture Partners. David, so clearly you're a big supporter of space tech, but as you look forward, can you talk about sectors or trends that you're bullish on and why it is that you're excited about them?
Yes, there are, of course, many interesting areas of innovation today. I think the most interesting area is what's now being called deep learning. And this is really the exploitation of neural networks at a time when we now have the computing capability to solve interesting problems, and we have enormous stores of data that we can use to train these neural networks. Neural networks have been around for a long time. When I was in school studying computer science, I made my own neural network, but it was running on a 286 AT, and it didn't really have much horsepower. More recently, we now have all these NoSQL big data technologies that allow us to train neural networks, but more importantly, we have the computing capability to run them. And the big advance that enabled that was the utilization of GPUs, of graphic processing units, and applying them to neural networks. So GPUs were designed by companies like NVIDIA to manage the graphics on computer displays, and they have to do this in parallel. All the pixels on your monitor have to be refreshed very, very quickly in real time. And there are many, many pixels that it has to refresh in order to provide an engaging, high-resolution, full-color experience. And so it turns out that you're really solving the same mathematical problems as what you have in a neural network that simulates the parallel architecture of a brain, where neurons are firing very quickly in parallel across a system. So by using those GPUs, we're able to make neural networks work much faster. And now more recently, there's a slate of startups who are building TPUs, tensor processing units, which are really just GPUs without the extra baggage of the graphics, just the core network, parallel network capabilities. And that's accelerating the computing capability even faster. And so now with neural networks that can be trained, that can run at speeds approaching orders of magnitude of human thought, we can solve problems that we couldn't solve before. And in a way it has some very profound social implications because many of the jobs that we have always thought of as human jobs will be doable by neural networks. And in many cases, neural networks can do them better. Neural networks can be smarter and, of course, don't require vacations or health benefits or any sleep. So there's a lot of ways that this is going to change our lives. One of the most prominent and impressive is self-driving cars, which is a manifestation of this phenomenon.
Are there certain
tiers of administrative work and or knowledge work that these neural network advances can go after first in terms of being able to accomplish them?
So, well, self-driving cars is definitely a huge industry that's going to change how we do logistics on this planet. Another very important domain of neural networks is visual recognition. The fact that neural networks can recognize objects in a picture or a video, and that allows all kinds of intelligence and monitoring and other things to happen. I think probably the most important, though, is in the area of natural language processing.
Yep.
Because we can now that computers can actually speak and understand English or whatever your language is, we now have a new paradigm for delivering services to people. Forget about, we've already seen a huge shift from computer-based applications to mobile apps, which were more intuitive and more intimate and closer to the user. I think we're going to see the same shift over the next 10 years from apps to app-less services that are delivered through natural language. We are all surrounded now by microphones and speakers and usually screens so that we can have a conversation with AI entities around us, and they can do whatever it is that we need to do without us having to learn an app, without us having to fire up a phone or a computer and go through menus and swipe and all of this. We just say what we want. There's no faster learning curve than that. And that's such a dominant user interface that my expectation is that pretty much all personal computing is going to be disrupted by newcomers who use natural language processing. And of course, there'll be all kinds of new applications that are unlocked. If you have an Amazon Echo in your home, for example, then you've probably discovered the shopping list app where you say, Alexa, add pickles to the shopping list. And she does it.
That's right.
That's an application which once you've used it, it's so fantastic. You don't want to give it up. And yet, if it weren't for this natural language interface, you wouldn't use a computer to do that. I'm not going to take out my phone and pull out a shopping list app so that I can then, poke away and say pickles on it or something. It just doesn't work. But because of the immediacy of the natural language, it's something that a computer can now make super convenient.
Coincidentally, I was just talking with my wife yesterday, and she's finding herself speaking to Alexa in rooms where we don't have a device. So she's asking for the weather or adding to the shopping list and going, oh, we don't have an Echo in here.
Yeah, you just get an Echo Dot, right?
Right.
They're super cheap. I mean, the whole point is that because all of the intelligence is in the cloud, really all you have to pay for is the microphone, the speaker, and the Wi-Fi radio. That's all you need. And AI will be everywhere. I happen to think also that screens really enhance the conversation, and I'm looking forward to what Samsung is going to do with Viv. I'm hoping that because Samsung owns so much TV real estate in people's homes, that they use that to make the TV screen part of the conversation with your AI. When you talk to Siri, for example, it's often very useful to be able to look at the screen as Siri presents you options or shows you a map or something.
Right.
And I think that's going to be very useful. It's not necessary, and there'll be lots of times, for example, when we're driving or other times when we don't have a screen. But I think that's going to be less the case over time, especially as we don't have to drive anymore.
That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.